Happy Tuesday, Miami Dolphins fans. Welcome back in the Dolphins Today by Chat Sports. I am Nic Rohloff. After missing last week's live show, it feels good to be back here on a Tuesday afternoon hanging out with the Fins fans. And boy, do we have a lot to talk about because the NFL Combine is this week. We are about 13 days away from NFL free agency beginning on March 10th. And boy, there is a lot to discuss around the Dolphins. Tyreek Hill, Terron Armstead, Jevon Holland, Mike McDaniel, and more. So hopefully y'all are ready to talk some Dolphins football because this might be the most loaded live show we've had since the season has ended 2 months ago. But as always, I want to welcome in everybody joining us here on a Tuesday afternoon. Help kick off the live show. Shout out your city for me down in the comment section. Let me know where all the real ones are watching from. How is everyone doing? I see Richie, Bill Lyon, and Ricky Slushy in the chat already as well. Slushy, man, I can't do it. I wish I could. But I do not have the ability to just stop the bots from commenting. I can go back and remove some of the comments, but I can't really do that for, them to stop doing it right away. I know, it sucks. It's annoying. There was one person at one point, Justin, by the way, that thought that we paid the sex bots to comment on our shows. That's how dumb people are sometimes. That's just me. You know, based off our stream last night on the Heat Report, how much I think people are stupid nowadays. But not anyone in the chat right now, someone legitimately thought at one point we paid the sex bots to comment on our live shows and stuff like that. It made absolutely no sense. But shout out to Tristan watching from Plantation, King in Atlanta, Cuse, New York for Bill Lyon. Live action is in California. I see Sinister in California as well. I see John Murphy in Weeping Water. Connecticut for Ralph. Angels in Fort Myers, Florida. My family is in Fort Myers, Florida right now. That's where they live. They moved there. We grew up in Rochester, New York. But now my parents live in Fort Myers, Florida. So, yeah. Tristan's in Pensacola, Florida. A lot of people from the Southeast today. I like it. Alfred's from Huntsville, Alabama. But one of the reasons why I love this channel so much is because we are truly worldwide. Because Kieran, watching from London. EMT's in the Bahamas. Jason's in Connecticut. Timothy's in Iowa. We are truly, truly spread out. Angels from Fort Myers, too. How about that? Richie says, I made an edit for you. I'm nervous. What do you mean edit? What do you mean edit, Richie? What do you mean? Paul's in Brooklyn. Love that. What do you mean you made an edit? I'm nervous. What's up? Barry B's in the chat. My guy in Phoenix, Arizona. Derek's from the Bahamas. Yeah, I see your profile picture. Grabbing from a Heat live show. Oh, boy. Let's talk some Dolphins football for a little bit here because we do have a big-time move in the world of Miami. It was announced today at Mike McDaniel's press conference that he and the Dolphins are actually moving forward this offseason with the belief that Terron Armstead would not be on the 2025 roster. I put out a short about that. I tweeted about that. So if you don't follow me on Twitter, make sure you do follow me at Nic_Rohloff. And that was significant news because I've talked a lot about how I believe the Dolphins should move on from Armstead. Not that he is a bad player, but because you made such a significant investment in Patrick Paul with the second-round pick in 2024 that when you have an offensive tackle on a rookie contract like that, you need to take advantage because if he ultimately pans out, that's a player that's going to make $24-25 million per season if he pans out at the highest extent. So you need to take advantage of him potentially being good on that rookie contract. And if he sat behind Armstead again, I think you'd be wasting 2 out of the 4 years of that 4-year rookie contract. But Armstead is contemplating retirement, so he could be a post-June 1st retirement. You save $15 million, or you just cut him post-June 1st and you save $15 million. Well, Armstead is actually still mulling over that retirement, but plans to take his contract down to the minimum and base salary. Now, Rapport's kind of wrong about the money. He was not set to make $28.6 million this year. His cap hit was $22.8 million. So I don't understand where Rapport got that money amount from. But with Armstead still mulling over retirement, the Dolphins will save $14 million in cap space regardless if Armstead returns or not. So the Dolphins now have $15 million in cap space heading into free agency in 13 days because of Armstead taking down his salary to the absolute minimum right now, which is a major move for Miami. And I want to shout out Terron Armstead because Armstead may retire, he may not retire. But either way, the fact that Terron Armstead was proactive and helped Miami by doing this now, so the Dolphins knew that they had an extra $14 million in cap space going into free agency, is just absolutely massive. Spam those 72s down below because now Miami might be able to use that $14 million in cap space to sign a Will Fries, a Mekhi Becton, a Aaron Banks, a Will Hernandez in free agency for $10, $12 million per season over 2 or 3 years because Armstead freed up that money for Miami. That's pretty awesome stuff from him. I love it, and I know a lot of people like myself wanted the Dolphins to give Patrick Paul the start at left tackle this upcoming year, but it doesn't change the fact that Armstead's been great for Miami since he joined this roster 3 or 4 seasons ago, and it doesn't change the fact that this move by him is huge for the Miami Dolphins. Spam those 72s. Richie, Tristan. Listen, I love it. I absolutely love it. Richie hates the Miami Heat. Oh, boy. Oh, boy. I feel like Richie might be, I don't know why. I'm getting weird vibes from him. Remember that guy in the chat, Noah Borno? I feel like low-key Richie might be Noah. Yeah, the reason why I say that is because Noah is a Dolphins fan, but he's a Knicks fan. And not many people would screenshot a picture of me, change their profile picture, and like hate the Miami Heat, but also like the Dolphins and be in here for the live show other than Noah, which is why I think low-key we might have seen a personality change. Listen, he's going to deny it in the chat, but that's what I'm going to say. Oh, okay, he says he is a Heat fan. He just hates the Heat right now. All right, respectable. I also dislike the Miami Heat right now. I don't want to watch the games. Shout out Barry B, shout out Bill Lyon, shout out King Gaming, Every Noodle. I'll spam in those 72. Still got 81 people watching. I actually wanted to now shift a little bit of the talking point in the build-up portion to Jevon Holland. Why? Jevon Holland's an impending free agent, and it does not sound like Jevon Holland is going to return to the Miami Dolphins. We've talked a lot about that. Mike McDaniel was asked about Jevon Holland at his press conference earlier today. He had dropped a very interesting quote. Let's see what Mike had to say.
Yeah, I think Jevon has earned the right to go out and test his market, and that's something that I don't look as a negative because what I don't want is players being here and wishing they were somewhere else. So testing the market. This has been a guy that has been a contributor from his rookie year on. That a lot of teams have had the ability to watch him, and we feel good about his ability to test his market, and if business works out appropriately, his ability to be back here. So that process will start. I know he's looking forward to it, and he's earned that.
Yeah. You heard it from Mike. Sounds like Jevon Holland is not going to return to the Dolphins. When you say we're going to let him test his free agent market, and he's deserving to test his free agent market, they've used that term with other free agents in the past, like Mike Gesicki, Christian Wilkins. So it just feels more and more likely as time goes on, as we get closer and closer to free agency, that Jevon Holland will not be returning to the Miami Dolphins. So to me, I think he's leaving. I'm typing my L's, but let me know your thoughts down in the comment section. Will Jevon Holland return to Miami in 2025? Type S for stay. Type L for leave. King says L. Skeppy says L. Roosevelt says L. Yeah. Every Noodle says this is a nicer way to say kick rocks versus what Holland did when Vic Fangio left. Yeah. James says unfortunately leaves. I don't know why it's unfortunate. Listen. In a vacuum, is Jevon Holland a good football player? Yes, he is. But when you factor in the price that he's going to cost, it's not unfortunate to me. Like, I don't know, I got rubbed the wrong way, the way Jevon Holland handled the Vic Fangio situation last season. I know Fangio wasn't the most popular guy in the locker room, but that video was childish from him. I think just Jevon Holland isn't really a mature person. You saw him go on a podcast and complain that he wasn't in any of the Miami Dolphins Valentine's Day posts, like on social media. He said, like, I'm not in any of their stuff anymore. Jevon, how about because you're not technically on the roster anymore, Jevon? Don't get in your feelings. Like, I don't know, man. I just don't feel very positive towards Jevon Holland. I thought he was a good football player. I wanted to extend him before this past season. I'm glad Chris Grier didn't at this point. But with his price tag getting $18+ million per season potentially, I'm out on that. And I don't know, is the way he's handling the media and stuff like that also ain't really sitting right with me. So I'm cool with him, man. Dylan asks, what price point would you keep him? I've been very open about this. I said 16 mil or lower, I'd keep Jevon. If I could sign Jevon Holland to a 4-year, $60 million deal, which I know that's 15 mil per season, but 4-year, $64 million, I would keep him at 16 mil. But the Dolphins have to address offensive line. They have to address outside corner, defensive line, backup quarterback. They have to address a lot of things on this roster. And I think you can basically build your entire safety room for $18 million. You can sign someone for $11 million in free agency and then another veteran at $7 million and get the same type of production. And you could argue actually better production from those two players, right? So, I don't know. I don't think I would go higher than 15 or 16 mil for Jevon Holland. 4-year for $60 million, I'm in, but he's not going to do that, and he's going to get overpaid by someone else. So, like I said, I'd rather roll the dice with one of those guys on a 7-year, $8 million, $9 million contract like Julian Blackmon, Andre Cisco. You sign those two. Now, I doubt they address safety fully in free agency, but if you signed Andre Cisco and Julian Blackmon, each getting $8 million apiece over 2 or 3 seasons, you're now paying your safety tandem for multiple seasons at $17 million per season with Patrick Morris as your third guy. Like, I think I'm much more fine with that rather than doing Jevon Holland on an $18 million contract for 4 years. And you still have to find another starting safety. Like, I don't know. I just don't. That's why I just can't do it. Just not doing it. All right, we got 86 people watching. Let's get the show started. We need to get 40 likes. You want the show to start today where we officially break down into the news and rumors surrounding this Dolphins football team. Hit that thumbs up icon. 40 likes is the goal until we start. So we need 18 likes to get today's show started. Hit that thumbs up icon live here on a Tuesday afternoon completely for free. Daily content for free as well. Let's get 14 more likes. Let's get to 40 because our show today is loaded with 4 different segments. No mailbag today because that's how loaded our show is. We got so many things to talk about. First segment will be takeaways from Mike McDaniel's press conference from the NFL Combine earlier today. A Jonathan Allen trade. That was one of the rumors that came out this morning, that the Commanders are looking to deal Jonathan Allen. Could Miami be interested? We talked about trading for him last offseason when I took over the channel. Could we revisit that? Mel Kiper Jr. released yet another mock draft ahead of the Combine testing and interview meetings. Let's talk about who the Dolphins ended up selecting. And then plus, the last segment. The Dolphins have a very tough decision to make this offseason, which I don't think has been talked about enough. And I want to talk about it today on today's show. It has to revolve around Jaelan Phillips. We'll get to that on the end of today's show. But with 92 people watching, we're 3 likes away from getting today's show started. Who's going to step up? Now 2 likes away. Let's get the 40 likes so we can get the episode started and talk about what Mike McDaniel had to say at his NFL Combine press conference. 1 like away. Who's going to get there? 1 like away. Come on. Come on. Who's going to be that 40th like? Who's going to be that 40th like? Someone was. I don't know who, but someone got us to 40 likes. Appreciate all y'all. All right, I just had to read something from the bosses. And actually, take away the name badge just because I think it looks a little strange with the yellow badge, if you know what I mean. Personal preference type of thing. All right, we got the 40 likes, 100 people watching. Shout out to everyone tuning in. Let's talk about what Mike McDaniel said at the NFL Combine. Welcome to Dolphins Today by Chat Sports. I am Nic Rohloff. We have a loaded show to talk about here today because Mike McDaniel spoke at the NFL Combine this morning, like most coaches did. Not every GM spoke, a.k.a. Chris Grier didn't speak. Some GMs did speak, but McDaniel spoke, and we have a lot to break down. But I wanted to make sure you're following me on Twitter because if you were following me on Twitter, you would know some of the top quotes and takeaways from Mike McDaniel. For example, I tweeted out a video of Mike McDaniel speaking about Jevon Holland's free agency, which we'll actually play that clip later on in the show, so stay tuned for that. But you would have already seen it if you followed me on Twitter. At Nic_Rohloff is my handle. Go follow me now for more Dolphins coverage. All right, the number one takeaway from his press conference is that the Dolphins are going to likely be done with Terron Armstead at left tackle for the Miami Dolphins. Now, there was actually an updated report that came out after McDaniel's press conference because at the presser, McDaniel specifically said that Terron Armstead has not made a decision on if he is going to retire or not for the 2025 season, but the Dolphins as a team are operating as if he will not be playing for the Dolphins at left tackle, which means it is fully Patrick Paul season at left tackle, folks, and the Dolphins have much more clarity on that offensive line. And to me, this makes sense. Either way you want to slice it, whether the Dolphins were to move off of Terron Armstead or Armstead were to retire, I think it's in the best interest of the Miami Dolphins to just go in a different direction. Not saying that Terron Armstead can't play because he was actually a top 5 graded offensive tackle in 2024 when he was able to stay on the field. But at 33 years old, he just battled so many injuries, was not able to be on the field consistently. And you drafted Patrick Paul with the second-round pick in the 2024 draft. You invested at your future left tackle last April. And with the offensive line needing so many holes, it's good to know that you're likely going with Patrick Paul to the future. You really are. You have your center and right tackle combination hooked up with Brewer and Austin Jackson. We already have talked about what needs to happen at left guard and right guard this offseason, but now with that note on Armstead, you'll see that name and face Patrick Paul get elevated to that starting left tackle spot. But it actually took a little bit of a turn because we thought that this meant that they might even cut Terron Armstead if he was not going to retire. But Armstead did the Dolphins a pretty big, solid. Ian Rappaport reported it in the afternoon, saying that he plans to take his contract down to the minimum. He was set to make $28.6 million. That's actually not true. His cap hit was $22.8, so I don't understand where Armstead 28.6 came into play from Rappaport. But either way, this allows the Dolphins to save a pretty decent chunk of change in their cap space with 13 days until free agency. This move actually frees up $13.8, $13.9 million in cap space, which puts Miami around $15 million in cap space right now. Terron Armstead making a major move for Miami, lowering his money down to the minimum. Even if he does return or he doesn't return, he did the Dolphins a huge solid by freeing up cap space right now. And this is a big move by Terron. Regardless of how you feel about if he should be the left tackle for Miami in 25 or not, this is a huge favor he just did this Dolphins front office by freeing up cap space. Just show him some love. Spam those 72s down in the comment section. And like I said, this pay cut by Terron Armstead keeps the door open for a return. Like, he's not officially retiring. It seems like the Dolphins could release him post-June 1st and ultimately free up another $1 million in cap space. But at least as of right now, that move by Armstead to take down his contract to the minimum frees up $14 million in cap space, which is huge because Miami is barely cap compliant. But then after this, well, now they actually have a decent amount of cap space, $15.1 million. And even though that is not a lot to overhaul your roster and fill a lot of starting needs that you have, like offensive guard, defensive line, safety, cornerback, it's at least a little bit breathing room. And the Dolphins front office has a lot more decisions to make over the next couple of weeks before free agency because there is a pathway for the Dolphins to free up all the way up to $57 million in cap space without releasing a single player. Yeah, you heard me. All they would have to do is restructure Bradley Chubb, Tua Tagovailoa, Austin Jackson, Zach Sealer. They could even restructure Tyreek Hill, and they could get up to $57 million in cap space, which would give them a lot of breathing room to sign players in free agency. The question is, should they restructure all of those players a la Tua Tagovailoa because his might have the most long-term impact? but it gives the Dolphins options on different ways to create more and more cap space. All right, second biggest takeaway from his press conference is Tyreek Hill. It was widely speculated that Tyreek Hill had surgery early in this offseason on his wrist, but now it is officially known that Tyreek Hill did get surgery. We will show a picture from Tyreek Hill over the weekend in just a second, but I did want to share the clip of Mike McDaniel speaking on Tyreek Hill's injury, so let's toss it over to Mike.
He had surgery on his wrist. It was a ligament issue. It wasn't a broken wrist, and he's scheduled to be running, very soon, in which he'll be rely upon that in his training until he can catch the football, which will be more around summertime going into training camp.
Yeah, Mike McDaniel was speaking at his press conference, but we actually have a photo from Tyreek Hill this weekend. He was on Instagram. He posted this where he showcased this wrist bandage while at one of his stores at Soul Runner, I believe is his store name. And a lot of fans, including myself, speculated that he had surgery early in this offseason. And it obviously did happen because he showcased the wrist bandage and cast over the weekend, but then you just heard Mike McDaniel confirm that he did get surgery on to repair a ligament in his wrist. It was not fractured. It was not broken. It was a ligament. We'll discuss what his timetable will look like in a return for the Miami Dolphins in just a second, but I do want to show some love to Prize Picks, our sponsor on today's show, the #1 daily fantasy sports platform in North America. I play Prize Picks every single day, and hopefully you join me. Prize Picks, you can win now up to 1,000 times your money with picking just more or less on 2 or more player stat projections. Prize Picks puts their members first, so all withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. When my picks hit, I can get my money in as quick as 15 minutes. Prize Picks also offers weekly promotions that can lead to big payouts like Taco Tuesday. Each Tuesday, Prize Picks discounts select player projections up to 25%. Provide even more value for your lineups. Prize Picks is the best way to win real money this basketball season, hockey season, baseball season is just around the corner with no football in play. Which players going off, which ones aren't. Make your picks in less than 60 seconds. And I got an entry for tonight's action in the association. More than P.J. Washington, 16.5 points. More than Jason Tatum, 8.5 rebounds. And then less than Bradley Beal, 18.5 points. Just one example of how you can play. Join me and the millions of others on Prize Picks. Download the app today. Use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. One more time. Download the app today. Use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks. Run your game. All right, I want to get back to Tyreek Hill here because it is no surprise that Tyreek Hill ultimately got surgery on his wrist. His agent, Drew Rosenhaus, kind of hinted at that being necessary. Tyreek Hill hinted at that being a necessity as well. And he did battle the final 3-4 games of the season, pretty much all season long is what it kind of sounded like with that wrist injury. But the question with his surgery to repair that wrist is when will he actually return? Well, Mike McDaniel did kind of say it in that clip that we just showed, what the timetable will be. He will still be able to run. He will still be able to stay in shape and be conditioned. And you still will see him apparently race Noah Lyles as well. But in terms of catching the football and doing football activities, it sounds like he will start catching and using that wrist in the summer near training camp. He will spend the spring running and recovering, as we mentioned, but he will not probably be doing football activities with the Miami Dolphins until training camp in late July. So mandatory minicamp, OTAs, probably something that you will not see Tyreek Hill doing due to that wrist injury recovery. And I want to make sure you are subscribed because we have you covered on everything surrounding the Miami Dolphins. We are 70 subscribers away from 67,600. Hit that sub button because we put out daily content, weekly live shows around the Miami Dolphins, and put out everything you need covering this team. All right, let's round out the show with my last takeaway. Jevon Holland, the top free agent from this past Dolphins season. He is as good as gone. Holland does not seem like he will be returning to this roster. He is likely going to outprice the Miami Dolphins, and the Dolphins roster will need to see a complete overhaul at the safety department. Mike McDaniel shared what his thoughts are on Jevon Holland entering free agency. Let's see what Mike had to say earlier today.
Yeah, I think Jevon has earned the right to go out and test his market, and that's something that I don't look as a negative. Because what I don't want is players being here and wishing they were somewhere else. So, testing the market. This has been a guy that has been a contributor from his rookie year on. That a lot of teams have had the ability to watch him, and we feel good about his ability to test his market, and if business works out appropriately, his ability to be back here. So that process will start. I know he's looking forward to it, and he's earned that.
Yeah, it feels pretty obvious that Jevon Holland's not going to return, right? When you hear Mike McDaniel in that clip use the phrases and verbiage of we're going to let him test the free agent market, and he's deserved to hit that, and he's deserved to see what he is worth on the open market from other NFL teams. That is just speak for, yeah, we're not going to pay that much money for Jevon Holland. And you can make the argument on what he's actually worth in NFL free agency and if he should get paid 15 or 16 million per season or closer to the 18, 19, 20 mil per season that it's rumored he will receive. He's been a fine player for Miami, but assuming that his open market will dictate him getting closer to that 18, 19, 20 million dollars, yeah, that's probably a number that the Dolphins are just unable to reach on an annual average basis, considering they don't have a lot of cap space and they need to address other positions that are more important, like corner, defensive line, offensive line as well. But let me know your thoughts down in the comment section. Predict it for me. Will Jevon Holland return to the Dolphins roster in 2025? Type S for stay, type L for leave. Let me know your thoughts, down in the comment section. But I want to actually showcase this tweet, kind of furthering my point, right? There's been other players that left the Dolphins recently where you've seen the same type of verbiage be used by the coaching staff and front office. Christian Wilkins, Mike Gesicki. When you hear coaches and GMs say that these players have earned the right to test free agency, that's just a basic telling you, yeah, we're not paying that. It just is widely known. So if you are someone who is watching this video and still has the optimism and positivity that the Dolphins are going to find a way to re-sign Jevon Holland or franchise tag him, yeah, I would get that out of your system right now. The Dolphins will have 2 brand new starting safeties on this defense for 2025. And that is all right by me. I've said this so many times this offseason, and it's almost like beating a dead horse at this point. But the market is going to dictate $18 million plus for Jevon Holland a season. You just got to look a different way. There is a realistic pathway that the Dolphins could end up signing 2 free agent safeties for the same amount of money. There's a perfect world where the Dolphins sign Andre Cisco and Julian Blackmon in free agency. Do I think they'll sign both? No, probably not. But there's a world where they do on 2 different 3-year deals. Blackmon gets $8 million per season. Cisco gets $9 or $10 million. You could sign 2 starting safeties for the price of 1 in Jevon Holland. And I think a room of Cisco, Blackmon, and Patrick McMorris as your third guy, for example, is much better than Jevon Holland, whatever player you find somehow next to him as well. Like, it's just the versatility you would have in more depth on your roster by using that money to multiple safeties or a different position of need like offensive line just makes way more sense for me. So to me, I'm looking a different direction. Jevon Holland, appreciate the last 4 years you've spent here for the Miami Dolphins. Been a great second-round draft pick in 2020. There's no doubt about that, but it's time that we have to move on. All right, that will do it for today's show. Make sure you're following over on Twitter at Nic_Rohloff is my handle. Like I mentioned earlier, I tweeted out clips from Mike McDaniel's press conference. I'll have clips and updates this entire week on who the Dolphins have met with, which prospects like the Miami Dolphins. So if you want more from the NFL Combine, my Twitter's the place to go, at Nic_Rohloff. All right, first segment in the books. I gave you my top 3 takeaways from the McDaniel press conference. What was your top 3? What was your top 3? Or what was your top, I should say? Breaking news on the Heat. David says Armstead. Yeah, that would probably be mine. That would definitely be mine. Shoot. What did the Heat tweet out here? It has been turned that years to fracture segment right hand. He'll be split and reevaluated in 4 weeks. He suffered the injury against Bucks. Reevaluate in 4 weeks. We've got like 6 weeks left in the season, Justin. He's cooked. He's done. February 25th. Season, I think, ends around April 13th, April 14th. That's legitimately 6 weeks away. Like, if he's reevaluated in 4 weeks, that means at best he's returning in 5 weeks. He's done for the year. Yeah, I gotta tweet that out. Sorry, we cover both the Heat and Dolphins here, so I gotta do something Heat tweet real quick. In 4 weeks. Basically means he could return in 5 weeks at the fastest. We have 6 weeks left in the season. Jovic's year is likely over. I'll do a short on that later. All right. Appreciate the 100 people still watching. It's getting a little hot in here. I don't know about you. Are you hot? You're cold? I'm going to need that. If I got to finish this out. All right. No more clips. You feel pretty good about that? You did well. You did a good job. I saw someone in the chat say, clips, this is new on the channel. We use clips on the channel when they are ours. Like, that's the difference. Like, we won't ever steal content from others without giving them credit, and we will never put video on the channel if it's not our content. Like, we sent 8 people from our company to the NFL Combine, and they recorded the entire Mike McDaniel press conference, audio, visual, with our cameras and our equipment. So that's our stuff. Like, that's why we can show it on our channel, because that's our original content of the interview. Like, we would never steal like another beat reporter who posted their video on Twitter or anything like that. That's our stuff, which is why we can play it. So YouTube has very strict copyright laws, and we don't want to mess around with those. But we're definitely in the clear, since that is our own original content from the Mike McDaniel interview. Yeah. All right, 100 people still watching. We have 3 more segments to go through surrounding the Dolphins. This next one is actually a trade segment. Could Miami swing big and acquire Jonathan Allen from the Washington Commanders in a trade? Let's talk about it. Could Dolphins GM Chris Grier swing big in a trade with the Washington Commanders to acquire defensive lineman Jonathan Allen? Defensive line is a need for the Miami Dolphins, and Grier has made some big-time trades in the past, and this is one of the biggest needs. So I think the connection could be there. I want to talk about Allen as a player and if it makes sense for the Miami Dolphins, but you might be wondering why we are talking about a Jonathan Allen trade. Well, it's actually on Tuesday morning, before the NFL Combine got underway. It was reported that the Commanders had trade conversations centered around Pro Bowl defensive lineman Jonathan Allen. Washington plans to do right by the player, and Allen's camp is involved in helping him land in the right spot, either via trade or free agency, which is interesting, which we'll talk about later on. He has 1 year left on his contract at $15 million. Well, we mentioned the needs for the Dolphins roster. Defensive line comes in at number 3 on my list. I think it's very clear what number 1 is. We've talked about this list over and over in this offseason. But interior offensive line, left guard, right guard, biggest need for the Miami Dolphins. You also need to completely overhaul your safety room. But then defensive line alongside Zach Sealer is that next position that needs to be addressed, either free agency, the trade market, or the NFL draft. So Jonathan Allen could make sense for the Dolphins. And before we get into Allen, I want to make sure you're following us over on Instagram at Dolphins Today IG, because we put out more content on the Dolphins over there outside of our YouTube videos, whether it's short form content, just normal posts. We interact as well. If you want wall-to-wall coverage outside of our YouTube shows and live shows, go follow us on Instagram, Dolphins Today IG. Reason why I wouldn't be shocked with a trade for Jonathan Allen is because the Dolphins are going to need to find a way to fill out this entire roster, right? And this depth chart is lacking at defensive line. Zach Sealer is the only guy you have under contract. Calais Campbell is a free agent. Deshaun Hand's a free agent. Benito Jones is a free agent. See some other guys that were on the roster last year that are under contract, like Brandon Pillai. Like, Sealer, is the only one there. So you need to find a starter alongside him as well as depth behind him. And Allen could be a guy that starts next to Sealer in replacing Calais Campbell if you ultimately don't re-sign him during free agency. Now, some background information on Jonathan Allen, the former first-round pick out of Alabama. He will be 30 years old entering this 2025 season. A new team, if it was the Dolphins, would be on the hook for $15.5 million in 2025, but also he is a free agent in 2026. So it's a tough call to make a trade for Jonathan Allen. Despite what you think about him as an actual football player, when you just talk financials, it's tough, especially for a team in Miami that does not have a lot of cap space. Right now, they only sit at $15.1 million, so they could not even absorb him and be in the green in terms of cap space right now. Because you're trading for him, you're taking on that base salary this season, which is $15.5 million, but you also have to extend him because he is not going to get traded unless he gets a new contract. It just does not make him a desirable player despite him being a potential good fit on this Dolphins roster. And we're going to talk about his fit and him as a player more in depth coming here in a second. But seeing just the quick background information and the contract stuff, would you potentially make a trade for Jonathan Allen? If you are aggressive and want to go after him, type T for trade. If you are a little bit reserved and are holding off, type P for pass. Jonathan Allen was one of the better players in the NFL a couple of years ago. I mean, he was a Pro Bowler in 21 and 22, playing basically all 16, 17 games there. And he played all 16 out of 17 games in 2023. He dealt with injuries in 2024 for sure. But you see his numbers just slowly declining year in and year out, right? The tackles are dipping. TFLs are dipping. The sacks are dipping, almost 2 sacks a season. Like, Allen, as one of the most dominant pass rushing defensive linemen on the interior in the 2019 to 2022 kind of 4-year stretch, has not really been the same over the past 24 games that he's played. And I mentioned earlier on, he's 30 years old. How much time does Jonathan Allen have left in him of good football? And if you are making the correct or just presumed assessment that he is declining, then you still have to ask yourself and go back to that $15.5 million contract for this season. Is a player that is currently on the decline worth $15.5 million per season, this season at least? I don't know if he is. And there's just more numbers to back up his kind of descent here, unfortunately, in the NFL. You look at his pass rush grade from PFF and on the left side and his pressures on the right side. It's going down just like the raw statistics every single year since 2021. And that shouldn't come as a surprise, right? Like, as you get older, your production's just going to naturally decline, especially in one of those positions like defensive line that requires physicality, quick first step, burst, athleticism. Like, as you get older, those things dissipate, right? So you're just naturally not going to be as good. So, like, when you're talking about trading for Jonathan Allen, whether I'm doing it, whether other people creating content are, or you are with your friends and family at home, we have to quickly realize that the Jonathan Allen that would be playing for the Dolphins in 2025 is not the same dominant Pro Bowl version that we have ingrained in our minds and remember in the 21 and 22 seasons. That 9-sack, 8-sack interior defensive lineman type of guy just isn't in there anymore. Now, maybe I'm wrong and he has a resurgent 2025 season with the Dolphins or somewhere else. If it was with Miami, I would gladly be wrong. But I just don't see that actually coming to fruition. And we'll continue the conversation here in a second. But we are sponsored by Factor. I love Factor meals. It makes sure I'm eating healthy and right. And I want to make sure you are hooked up with them today. Factor meals optimizes your nutrition with chef-made gourmet meals that make eating well easy. They are dietitian approved and ready to heat and eat in just 2 minutes so you can fuel right and feel great, no matter what life throws at you. With 40 options across 8 dietary preferences on the menu each week, it's easy to pick meals tailored to your goals. You can choose from preferences like Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, or Keto. I prefer the Calorie Smart and Protein Plus type of options because as I'm in the gym every day, I need the protein to help build those muscles. The Calorie Smart also limits the amount in. They also have really good wholesome smoothies, breakfast, grab-and-go smokes, or snacks, and more add-ons to help make your overall diet just more complete. So join me, eat smart with Factor. Get started at factormeals.com/factorpodcast and use code FACTORPODCAST to get 50% off your first box plus free shipping. That's code FACTORPODCAST at factormeals.com/factorpodcast to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first box. Link is in the description and comments of today's video. We talked about Jonathan Allen declining in terms of his pass rushing over the last 4 seasons, but there's also added skepticism from my end. Although he's a very good player and has been good at some points in his career, he has not been as good as a run stopper compared to his ability to rush the passer in his career. And if his pass rushing ability is decreasing, but his run defense has always been trailing and behind, well, then what type of guy are you getting now? You look at his career rush defense grades from PFF, the bottom of his career the last 2 seasons at 37.9 and 41.3. But you look at the grades, they've never been spectacular. They've been middle of the pack or slightly above average at absolute best. Like his best run-stopping year was his rookie season in 2017. Like I think Jonathan Allen is a good football player. I think he's had a really good career. But at this point, with him continuing to decline, his struggles in the run defense department as well, makes me just kind of want to stay away from acquiring him when I have to pay him $15.5 million this upcoming year. But make sure you are subscribed to the channel because whether it's Dolphins trade rumors, news, or anything else, we will have you covered on a daily basis. We are also dropping 2 videos a day sometimes, so make sure you are on the lookout, have those notifications turned on as well. Join us here at the channel. Now, I have been relatively negative on Jonathan Allen on this episode, but there is one positive in terms of getting Jonathan Allen. He's cheap to acquire, and not in the sense of what you'd have to be paying him this upcoming season, but actually in terms of getting him from the Washington Commanders. Talking with Commanders host Jack Sperry, as well as some other people here at Chat Sports, it sounds based off the contract you probably want for an extension and the decline, it would probably only cost you a 7th-round pick in this draft. And in a vacuum, if you take away what you have to pay Jonathan Allen, getting a player of Allen's services for a 7th-round pick would be very, very beneficial because you're not going to get a player better than Jonathan Allen on the defensive line in the 7th round for 2025. So it would make sense to help you win now. But there's also a chance, folks, that Jonathan Allen gets cut. You saw that note earlier in the tweet from Ian Rappaport that the Commanders were working with Jonathan Allen via trade or free agency. Well, you say free agency, like, what do you mean free agency? He's not a free agent. Well, there is a chance that if no team wants to come calling for Jonathan Allen because they'd have to take on $15.5 million in 2025, Jonathan Allen could just be straight up cut. Jack Sperry, the host of Commanders Report here at Chat Sports, said that he actually thinks it's more likely that the Commanders cut Jonathan Allen than they find a trade partner. So to me, if I'm the Miami Dolphins and I have interest in Jonathan Allen, I'm probably going to wait this out, see if the Commanders ultimately release him, and then potentially sign him for the cheap. But maybe you are a little impatient and you don't want to consider waiting for him to get cut. And you want to trade for him. Well, let me know. Would you do this trade? Would you trade a 2025 7th-round pick to acquire Jonathan Allen in this offseason? Type A for accept, type D for decline. Let me know your thoughts. I would not do it. And I would not pay Jonathan Allen $15.5 million. Now, I would ultimately sign Jonathan Allen on a $6 million, $7 million deal in NFL free agency if the Washington Commanders release Jonathan Allen. But in terms of having to trade for him, even though it would likely only cost a 7th-round pick, I just cannot take on that $15.5 million in 2025. The Dolphins don't have a lot of cap space. Jonathan Allen would not make a large difference on this football team. He would help, but he would not move the needle. And I am not paying anyone that is not going to be here long term or move the needle for 2025, $15.5 million. So unless it's in free agency for cheap, I am not moving for Jonathan Allen. But if the Dolphins do make a move in free agency, the trade market, or anything comes out around the draft, we will have you covered. So as I always say, make sure you subscribe because we will have you covered. And if you're still watching the video and are not subscribed, you clearly like what we're doing. So why not just hit that sub button and lock us in for Dolphins coverage? All right, let me know. Would you guys trade for Jonathan Allen? Would y'all do it? Bill says pass. Gazer says no. Deadeye says no. Cameron says I'd rather have Campbell back. I actually am in. Like, if you could get Calais Campbell back on a 1-year, $4 or $5 million contract, yeah, I'd do it. Still need to address, I think, long-term defensive line. So, like, even if you got Calais Campbell back in free agency on that, like, 1-year, $4 or $5 million contract, I'd still probably try to draft a defensive lineman in the first, second, or third rounds to be that long-term guy next to Zach Sealer after 2025. Because if Campbell doesn't retire and re-signs with the Dolphins, I could almost guarantee that 2025 will be Campbell's last season in the NFL. That would be a pretty much guarantee. Matt saying yes. Matt would like to go after Jonathan Allen. Richie, you're being a weirdo, man. Weirdo. All right, still 84 people watching. We got 2 segments to go. We got to react to a mock draft from Mel Kiper Jr., as well as tell you about a tough decision that the Dolphins have to make. Let's get right into it. We're going to, Richie, you give me one more weird comment, I'm giving you a timeout. I just don't want that type of stuff in my chat, man. Being weird, dude. Baby oil, Diddy parties, like, it's just weird, man. You've been given a warning. To be like, you ever see bench warmers? I hope so. Yeah. That's a warning. That's a warning. That's a warning. All right. Ken, I don't disagree. I actually think Mel Kiper might be washed. I got to be honest. Like, I like Mel. Staple of the industry. Done a great job creating the pathway for guys like McShay, Dane Brugler, Daniel Jeremiah. But, like, he might be washed. But we're still going to talk about what he had to say because he is one of the OGs in the business. So let's get into the latest mock draft from the Miami Dolphins on Mel Kiper. We have another mock draft reaction. Mel Kiper Jr. released his second mock draft just ahead of the NFL Combine, and I wanted to take a look at who he had going to the Dolphins with the 13th overall pick. Talk through that prospect, see if it makes sense for the Miami Dolphins. But before we get into all of that, we do have a sub challenge on today's show, and it's with our rival Buffalo Bills channel that just got launched a month and a half ago. Who can get the most subs on this video? I cannot take losing to the Bills on YouTube. We already get crushed by the Bills on the football field so consistently. Hopefully that changes soon. But at least we can control our own destiny by winning our sub battle against the Bills breakdown on today's show. So hit that sub button. All right, we're not going to waste any time here with the 13th overall pick in the 2025 NFL Draft. Mel Kiper Jr. had the Miami Dolphins selecting offensive lineman Armand Membou from Missouri. And this is someone that we have talked about in the past on mock drafts, on mock draft reactions from other content creators. And Membou is continuing to rise up draft boards where he ultimately could be the first offensive lineman taken in this draft. Now, I know Will Campbell is getting all the buzz at number 4 overall with the New England Patriots, but I think there is a legit possibility that Membou could get taken inside the top 10 as well. The 49ers are a team that have been linked consistently to Membou, and they hold I think the 10th or 11th pick. I actually think it's the 11th pick, so maybe not top 10, but he is rising up boards to where he could be off the board when the Dolphins are picking at 13. But let's see what Mel Kiper had to say about Armand Membou. Miami could lose both starting guards, Eichenberg and Robert Jones, to free agency, and there is a chance to improve the pass protection as a whole. The Dolphins were 28th in pass block win rate this past season, 55.7%, and quarterback Tua Tagovailoa has had 3 diagnosed concussions over his career. This must be a priority. At Missouri, Membou played right tackle, where key contributor Kendall Lamb is also a free agent, by the way, but he can really line up anywhere. And some scouts think he's a better fit inside at guard. He allowed just 1 sack in 2024. And there is something that I like personally, but I also know that Chris Grier values quite a bit, and that's versatility alongside the offensive line. Chris Grier values offensive tackles more than offensive guards. Most likely everybody does. This is what is more valued around the league. But Chris Grier likes the guys that are able to play inside and outside. I think it's the reason why he targeted Isaiah Wynn in free agency a couple years ago and wanted to re-sign him last offseason, but ultimately didn't get the return on investment this past season due to his return from injury. But Membou being able to play inside, play outside, like Austin Jackson has done in the past, is a reason why I think Membou could be one of the top offensive linemen on the Miami Dolphins big boards when we get to the NFL draft in late April. And we're going to talk about Membou as a prospect here in just a second, but let me know, would you draft Armand Membou out of Missouri at the 13th overall pick to shore up some offensive line help, type D for draft, or type P for pass? I would be typing my Ds. I would absolutely draft Armand Membou. There's a lot of reasons why you should like him as a prospect: his versatility, his athleticism, his ability to play in the zone run blocking scheme that the Dolphins employ with Mike McDaniel as the play caller. Membou can do it all. But I did want to look back at this mock draft before we talk about Membou as a prospect more in depth about who the Dolphins passed up in this mock draft to take Membou at 13. These were the top 5 players that I thought Miami could be interested in that they took Membou over. Malachi Starks, the safety out of Georgia. Mykel Williams, the edge from Georgia as well, who's an intriguing player because in most mock drafts, he's going inside the top 10, but he was available on the board and was not drafted by Mel Kiper. Jahdae Barron, the defensive back from Texas, who can play outside at the corner, play nickel, can play safety, has been rising up boards. He was there. Walter Nolan was there. And then the true offensive guard, Tyler Booker from Alabama, was there. And I got to be honest, if I was sitting there picking at 13, I think Membou would probably be in my top 3 or 4 alongside Nolan, Mykel Williams, and Malachi Starks. But I have a little bit of a prediction to make on the show right now. And now this can be changed because of free agency. We'll be changing things based off who the Dolphins do and do not sign. But I don't think the Dolphins are ultimately going to draft an offensive lineman at 13. I know that might frustrate people. That might annoy people that Miami is failing to draft an offensive lineman at 13. But the reason why I think they do not draft one is because I ultimately think they address offensive line in free agency and then utilize that first round pick to go defense in the first round. There is just so many better offensive linemen in free agency in comparison to like free agent corners, free agent defensive linemen, free agent edge rushers. Like the offensive line group is fine. Like you got Aaron Banks, Mekhi Becton, Will Hernandez, Will Fries, James Daniels. You could sign two of those guys that will only cost you a combined $24, $25 million per season for two of them on multi-year contracts. You can now kind of solidify your offensive line with veterans, right? You can have Patrick Paul at left tackle, one of those free agents at left guard, Aaron Brewer at center, one of those free agents at right guard, Austin Jackson at right tackle. Feel pretty confident about your offensive line. Still can draft depth pieces on the interior and on the outside in the third, fourth, fifth rounds where you have a lot of picks. Yeah, that's not a bad thing. They probably should do that. But to me, with some of these elite defensive players like Starks, like Walter Nolan, Mykel Williams, Jahdae Barron, Will Johnson if he's there, I think it would be better used to use the 13th pick on one of those young defensive studs rather than on an offensive lineman when you can sign multiple starters in free agency and still draft an offensive lineman potentially for the future in the middle rounds of the second, third, fourth round where you have so many picks and so many options. That's kind of where I think the Dolphins were ultimately going to go with this, but that can change. We'll see how the Dolphins do in free agency. But let's talk about Membou here in just a second because, well, Kiper mocked him here, so let's talk about him as a prospect and his fit. But before we do that, I want to shout out Prize Picks, the sponsor on today's show, and my favorite daily fantasy sports app that I play every day. All you do is pick more or less on two or more stat projections, and you could win up to 1,000 times your cash right now. And I know football is not here, but you can play baseball. That's just around the corner. Basketball, hockey, golf, professional, collegiate. It doesn't matter. PrizePicks also invented the flex play, which means you can still cash out if your lineup isn't perfect. You can double your money even if one of your picks doesn't hit. And if you sign up today, you can get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. You can play so many different ways, by the way, daily, season long. Think Steph Curry will get more than 5 3-pointers next week. Giannis more than 35 points. Sure, take those picks. Or you can look towards the baseball season and go season-long projections like I have. I have more than Paul Skeens strikeouts, more than Tarek Skubal strikeouts, more than Jarren Duran's home runs. That's one example of how you can play Prize Picks on a basis, either season-long or daily. So join me and the millions of others on Prize Picks. Download the app today and use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. One more time, download the app today. Use code CLNS to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks. Run your game. Let's get into Armand Membou as a prospect because, boy, did he have an excellent season this past year for Missouri in the SEC, putting up gaudy numbers according to Pro Football Focus. Is one of the highest graded offensive linemen, regardless of tackle or guard position this past year. 90 overall grade. It did not allow a sack. 4 penalties only as well. That run blocking grade is just so intriguing. But taking away from what he did on the field, you heard Mel Kiper earlier say that although he has been a right tackle at Missouri for the past 3 seasons, many scouts believe he will go to guard. Well, he isn't the biggest offensive lineman. He's 6'3", 314 pounds. Now, the offensive lineman will be tested and interviewed this upcoming week in the Combine on Fridays and Saturdays, so we'll get an official measurement on Membou arm length, which is important for offensive linemen. 34 inches is the benchmark for playing tackle in the NFL. We'll get official weight, official height. We'll get to know his speed and athleticism. But he is a smaller guy, which is why he kind of projects as a guard rather than a tackle, even though he's played tackle in college. But that size of Membou is kind of leaning into, in my opinion, what his top trait is as an NFL draft prospect. Because we talked about his versatility, but the athleticism that Armand Membou possesses is what makes him so intriguing. Because when you think of what the Dolphins like in their offensive linemen, they like the ability to get to the perimeter and get to the second level. You have to be able to play in a zone run blocking scheme. because Miami, as we consistently say, runs more zone run scheme and zone running plays than almost everyone out there. They run so many end arounds, tosses, stretch plays, where you need to be able to get out on the perimeter, get to the second level. And Membu does that quicker and better than almost any other NFL draft prospect at the offensive line spot this year. And it was reflected with his 2024 PFF grades in the run blocking department. When you looked at offensive tackles, we didn't do guards, just offensive tackles. He ranked 7th in run blocking grade this year. He ranked 8th in terms of total offensive tackles in zone run blocking schemes. And he still ranked elite in the gap schemes at offensive tackles with 18th overall. So he can do it in any type of scheme, but he specifically excels in the zone type of scheme. And when you think of what the Dolphins have at offensive line, his versatility and ability to slide in at any position is just going to be such a high value if the Dolphins drafted him. Yeah, Patrick Paul is likely going to become that starting left tackle, but with Aaron Brewer at center, Austin Jackson at right tackle, you need a starting left guard, you need a starting right guard. Now, Austin Jackson, although had his best season in 2023 as a tackle, he has played guard in the past, and maybe he gets moved inside for Membu at right tackle. But I would probably project Membu to get slotted in at right guard in between Brewer and Jackson, and you would have one heck of an athletic trio on your offensive line from center, right guard, right tackle if Membu was your ultimate right guard starter week 1 in 2025. And I will say this, even though Membu projects as a guard, it is obvious based off his draft history that Chris Grier prefers tackles that can move inside his guards rather than just pure offensive guards. And that is not Chris Grier just by himself, by the way. I want to make it very, very clear that offensive tackles are valued higher in the NFL than guards. It just is, because protecting the outside is much more important with these talented edge rushers like Myles Garrett, Micah Parsons, Max Crosby, Chop Robinson rushing the passer and getting to the quarterback from the perimeter. But Grier likes those guys that can play across the entire offensive line. Not going to ask you to play center, but if we need you to in a spot, can you play left guard? Can you play right tackle? Can you play left tackle? Well, we've seen Isaiah Wynn have to do that. We've seen Austin Jackson do that over his career. We've seen Liam Eichenberg do that, even though he was horrible at it. Membu is capable of doing that, which is why I think he would be someone that Chris Grier has circled pretty high on his big board, as I mentioned earlier in the show. All right, that will do it for this episode of Dolphins Today by Chat Sports. Make sure you are subscribed, because as we get closer and closer to the NFL draft in late April, we will have you covered. And we mentioned free agency will change a lot for Miami. When the Dolphins make moves in free agency and sign players, we will have you updated with videos. So join the channel and subscribe today. All right, third segment in the books. Would you draft Armand Membu at pick number 13? Let me know your thoughts. D for draft, P for pass. Would y'all do it? Palm Tree Heart says, will Booker be there at 13? Likely. I think there's a small chance he gets drafted ahead of Miami, but like I mentioned, offensive guards just aren't valued as high as offensive tackles. So for a pure offensive guard to be taken that high in the NFL draft is very unlikely. It's possible, but unlikely. I think the highest Tyler Booker could go is 10th overall to the Chicago Bears, because they desperately need a guard. But after the Bears, I think the Dolphins would be the first team to think about taking Booker at 13. Because the Cowboys are at 12. Yeah, Zach Martin retired, but they actually have a bunch of guys on that offensive line. They wouldn't take Booker. Yeah, they wouldn't be taking Booker. The Niners at 11 or probably not. Like I said, the Bears at 10 could be the first team. Saints at 9, no. Panthers at 8, no. And these other teams aren't taking him in the top 7. So Booker will probably be there at 13. The only team that could take him is the Bears at 10. But I think they would be more likely to take Armand Membu, who can play both tackle and guard, rather than a strict guard in Booker. And even though Kelvin Banks is sliding down draft boards, I could see him going ahead of Booker because he might get pushed inside the guard. So I think Booker will be there at 9. David, that's not true. Josh Simmons is a pretty true offensive tackle from Ohio State. I would probably say Josh Connerly from Oregon is a true offensive tackle as well. Those are the two probably true offensive tackles. We'll see at the Combine. If Will Campbell has 34-inch arms and he passes the length test at the Combine, then he'll be labeled as a pure offensive tackle. He could play guard, but he'll be an offensive tackle coming out. I don't think we can clearly categorize these draft prospects as tackles, guards, or hybrids between the two until we are done with this week and we see them work out on Friday/Saturday at the offensive line. So, just want that to be known. All right, we got one more segment on today's show. It is about a tough decision that the Dolphins have to make. Oof. I feel like a sneeze is coming, but I don't know if it's going to happen now, and I don't want it to happen in the middle of the show. That would suck. Appreciate it, AKA. I feel like it's coming. God damn it. By the way, how about this weather? Hate to be that guy, but after the last 3 weeks of it being freaking freezing, I go to it's sunny and 73 outside right now, and it's going to be that way for the rest of the week. Hello. Hell yeah. We gotta get a squad hoop day soon, so I can take y'all to school. Show y'all who's boss around here. Okay. I see you. I see. Like, I always like hooping with new people. I like to see how they play and stuff like that. Like, I've played with everyone pretty much here, besides all the new hires. Seeps is a hooper, and although he will probably tell you that he's better than me, I will tell you I'm better than him. What'd you say? So here's the thing. Here's the difference. And I'll admit, he's gotten me more in one-on-one situations, but I'm also not a one-on-one hooper. I'm a full court team guy because my best attributes is my shooting as well as my playmaking, and those two things don't really work well in one-on-one settings. Like my ability to force the defense to gravitate towards me on the offensive end frees up others, but I'm also a really good passer, and I'm a good rebounder because naturally at 6'2", I'm taller than the average person. Basketball world, not that tall, but for the average hoopers, I'm always like biggest, and I can like borderline rim graze dunk too, so like I've got a little bit of a vertical ability, so I'm a good rebounder too. So my best access come in 5-on-5 full court settings. Yeah. So he'll get me in the one-on-one hesitation isolation moves. I'm Duncan Robinson, but I'm better at rebounding and I'm a better playmaker than Duncan Robinson. All right, enough with the basketball talk. This is an NFL show. Let's get into the final segment on today's episode. Let's throw up the name badge here real quick on this one, because the Dolphins have a tough decision to make. Let's get into it right now. I am Nic Rohloff. This is Dolphins Today by Chat Sports. And on today's show, we're going to talk about a tough decision that this Dolphins coaching staff and front office must make that I don't think a lot of people have been talking about on Dolphins Twitter or content creator space. What is that decision, you ask? Well, what should the Dolphins do with Jaelan Phillips? Because Phillips, former first-round pick in the 2021 draft, has had a very solid career to this point, but has also dealt with massive injuries and is entering, in 2025, the final year of his contract. Like I said, it is the fifth-year option on his rookie contract. He's making $13.2 million this season. But the issue with Jaelan Phillips is that he's just played 12 games in the past 2 years. He played 8 games in 2023 and then 4 games in 2024. That's 35.2% of the games Miami's played in the last 2 seasons. That is not a lot, folks. And although when he's on the football field, He's been very, very good in both the run game and the pass rushing department. The question is, are you going to make an investment on a player that has had so many injuries in the past and could ultimately not be worth the financial investment that he is going to require? That's the question. And we're going to debate from both sides of the equation on today's show, but I want to get your thoughts on it first. Would you extend Jaelan Phillips going into the final year of his rookie contract? Let me know. Type Y if you would extend him. Type N if you would not to extend him. And I'll say this. Later on in the show, I am going to tell you what I would officially do as of right now with Jaelan Phillips in terms of extending him or not extending him. But I do want to go through him as a player and talk through some of what the Dolphins have done in the past, because I do want it to be clear, there was another player drafted in the first round in that 2021 draft class of Jaelan Phillips. It was Jalen Waddle. And the Dolphins have already decided what to do with Jalen Waddle entering last season. Before this past season in 2024, the Dolphins already extended Jalen Waddle, who was in the same draft class, on a 3-year, $84.75 million contract. Now, Waddle has had a much better start to his career. Wide receiver is a position that Miami values, and they wanted to lock in Waddle as the future wide receiver one of this organization once Tyreek Hill moves on. And I understand that, but I do find it fascinating they were swift and quick to get Waddle locked down long term when Jaelan Phillips could have had that same type of contract in that draft class. And when you look at what the Dolphins have at linebacker/edge right now, it's one of the most confusing positions on this Dolphins roster. And you might ask why. Well, it's because they drafted Chop Robinson with the 21st pick in last April's draft, and he's been a really good return on investment early on here. But outside of him, you have Phillips, who has one more year on his contract. You have Bradley Chubb, who could be a cut casualty and a cut candidate to save $19.5 million this offseason. And you have another rookie in Mo Kamara that you drafted in the middle rounds of the 2024 draft. So outside of Chop, you only have Mo Kamara on this team with a long-term contract and a future in this group. So you have a little bit of a murky area in terms of what the future of this edge group looks like on this Dolphins roster. And before I tell you what I expect or what I think the Dolphins should do, I want to tell you what I expect with Jaelan Phillips. And I do think with the murkiness of what is going to happen with Bradley Chubb, what is going to happen in the NFL draft and NFL free agency, I wouldn't expect the Dolphins to make a decision on what to do with Jaelan Phillips in terms of extending him, not extending him, until May, June, heck, maybe even July before training camp. Because they'll probably want to see how he's progressing from this torn ACL injury, and they'll probably will be telling us what they're going to do based off what they do in the draft. If they draft another edge rusher with the 13th pick, which I would not call it crazy, like if the Dolphins picked Mykel Williams from Georgia at 13, Mike Green, or any of these other edge rushers like James Pierce at 13 overall in the NFL draft, like it would not shock me. And that would basically tell you, yeah, they're probably not extending Jaelan Phillips before 2025, and they're going to move forward with Chop Robinson, Kamara, and whoever that draft pick is. Or maybe they sign a couple players in free agency at edge. So that will personally declare to me what Miami will ultimately do. Now, with that being said, though, getting back to Phillips as a player, he is very, very good when he's able to stay on the field. Like, he was excellent in 2022, in 2023. And, yeah, 2023 season got cut short, but he was on a tremendous pace to have his first double-digit sack season, right? I mean, he's on pace there to get 12, 13 sacks potentially. And then he has the Achilles injury that forces him to miss the remaining 6 games. And then he returns and is somehow able to play in week 1 for the Dolphins, plays in the first 4 games of the year, and then tears his ACL on Monday Night Football against the Tennessee Titans. Like, it was just truly disheartening and heartbreaking to see Phillips return from the tough injury that was the Achilles just to suffer another catastrophic injury in a different part of his lower body, which is why there's major concern on giving him a long-term extension going into 2025. and we're going to continue this conversation. But I do got to give a shout out to our sponsor, which is Factor Meals, the number one way that I stay in shape, eat healthy. It helps me out so much because Factor Meals has chef-made gourmet meals that make eating well easy. They're dietitian approved and ready to heat and eat in just 2 minutes so you can feel great no matter what life throws at you. With 40 options across 8 dietary preferences on the menu each week, it's easy to pick meals tailored to your goals. You can choose from preferences like Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, or Keto. I usually use Calorie Smart and Protein Plus the most. You can lose up to 8 pounds in 8 weeks with the Factor Keto meals, though. Based on a randomized controlled clinical trial with Factor Keto, results will vary depending on diet and exercise, but it is possible, folks, and they're delivered straight to your door. Eat smart with Factor. Get started at factormeals.com/factorpodcast and use code FACTORPODCAST to get 50% off your first box plus free shipping. That's code FACTORPODCAST at factormeals.com/factorpodcast to get 50% off plus free shipping on your first box. Shout out to Factor. That link is in the description and comments of today's show. Now, if you're going to make the argument to pay Jaelan Phillips, this would be one of them. It's the fact that he, unlike some other edge rushers out there in the NFL, is capable of being impactful in the run game as well as rushing the passer. His grades in terms of rush defense have been good. In 22 and 23, he was rated very above average. Now, he struggled his rookie season, but listen, he's a rookie. He's adjusting to the NFL. But you see how good his grades were in the 22 and 23 seasons. You can throw away the 24 seasons basically because he only played 4 games. But in the 22 and 23 campaign, the former Hurricane was terrific for the Dolphins defense. And we talk about the run game being something he's good at. How about how good he is in terms of getting after the quarterback? Like, this statistic kind of doesn't even need to talk about how many games he plays because it's just used on when he rushes the passer. What is his win rate? Yeah, it's very, very good. He is ranked inside the top 50 and pass rush win rate every year of his career. I just want it to be known, by the way, when you talk about in the NFL, there are 32 NFL teams, which means there are 2 edge rushing starting players on each team, which means there are 64 starters. But there also is probably about 85, 90 players that could be contributed as players that contribute / are starting caliber players as well because a lot of teams have a 3-man rotation. Yet he still is in the top half of pass rush win rate every single year of his career. With in 2022, he was 6th in the NFL with a 16.9% win rate. He is consistently someone getting after the quarterback, forcing them to step up in the pocket, to get flushed out of the pocket, and Phillips is able to complement that with good run stopping ability as well. Jaelan Phillips is a very, very good edge rusher, and he's a hit prospect. Like, it is a good pick by Chris Grier when they drafted him 18th overall in 2021. The question is, though, is he going to be able to stay healthy long term? And we'll talk about his injury history, but when Jaelan Phillips news happens, whether it's them not extending him, whether it is the Dolphins giving him an extension, we will have you covered. So make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss a piece of Miami Dolphins news when it gets announced. Join the channel today. And it's a legit cause for concern. When Jaelan Phillips is on the field, he's great. He looks like one of the best young edge rushers in the NFL, and the difference between the Dolphins defense with him on the field to when he's off the field, it's very evident. It's paramount. But the issue is he just can't stay on the field. We mentioned the number earlier on in the show. He has played in 12 of the possible 34 regular season games for the Dolphins. 35.4% of the games over the past 2 seasons. And it's not like the injuries have just been nagging, reoccurring injuries. They're major injuries. They started in September of 2023 when he had a back sprain, forced him to miss a game. Then, a couple weeks later, he had an abdomen strain. He missed a couple more games. Then he stayed healthy for all of October, most of November, before tearing his Achilles, which ended his season, missing the last 6 games of the 2023-24 season. Was able to return to the Dolphins roster and be available for Week 1 against Jacksonville Jaguars in 24. But then in that Week 4 game against the Tennessee Titans, he tore his ACL, which forced him to miss the last 13 games of the season. And the reason why it's important to talk about this is because these injuries are no joke. If they were just consistent nagging injuries in the back and abdomen, you'd be like, all right, this is what it is. But for a young player in a position like an edge rusher, defensive lineman, that is so important to have physicality, a quick first step, burst off of the line of scrimmage. Yeah, you know what's important to have burst? A perfectly healthy knee and a good Achilles. And it's not saying that he doesn't have that anymore, but when you've already had catastrophic injuries like a torn Achilles and torn ACL, that's going to affect the ability that you have to be an athlete, to get off the ball quick, to beat these offensive tackles with speed moves, and then leverage that in with a swim move or a power move. So I'm skeptical of Jaelan Phillips being able to be good long-term for the Dolphins. And when you talk about what the Dolphins have struggled with over the past couple of seasons, it's been being able to stay healthy on the football field. The Dolphins simply cannot invest in an injury-prone player. And as much as it sucks to admit, Jaelan Phillips is an injury-prone player. If he can stay healthy in 2025 and prove that he can return to being an elite pass rusher, so if he plays 14, 15 games this season, has 8.5 to 10 sacks, and is a difference maker in the run game, well, then I would love to sign Jaelan Phillips to a long-term extension after 2025. But I am not going to extend him before the season. I need to see him play a full year after back-to-back seasons in 23 and 24 of big injuries like a torn Achilles and a torn ACL. But it's not like you have just extending him or not. Like, yeah, it would be pricey, but if you do want to hold on to him after the 2025 season, you would have the franchise tag option to do that as well. You can transition tag him, you can tag him, and then buy yourself time to work out an extension to where he doesn't have to play on a 1-year, $25 million type franchise tag price, which it could be next season. It just ultimately gives Miami a lot of flexibility. So to me, if you're asking me the question on if Jaelan Phillips should get extended before he enters the final year of his fifth-year team option on his rookie contract, I am saying no. I'm letting this year play out, seeing if he could stay healthy, seeing if he could be productive. And if he can do both of those things, well, then I am fine paying him $18, $20+ million going forward, because he is someone that when he's on the field is really, really good. And I'd like to keep him around, but he needs to be able to prove he can stay healthy. As always, folks, make sure you stay subscribed. I'm Nic Rohloff. We put out daily content here at Dolphins Today, including weekly live shows on Tuesdays. If any more news or rumors comes out in Miami, we'll have you covered. And like I always say, if you're still watching today's show and episode and you're not subscribed, well, you clearly like what we're doing, so join the channel right now. Don't miss a thing. All right, I gave my official opinion with Jaelan Phillips. Would you extend Jaelan Phillips? Y for yes, N for no. Let me know. Would you all do it? Bill says no. James says no. Limtree says yes. Time Man says no. AKA says feel like the same as you. King Gaming says no, too injury prone. Matt says yes. Cameron says no. It sucks because Jaelan Phillips, like the goal in the NFL, the goal is really for any sports franchise is to draft players, have them succeed, and be successful, right? Like the goal is to be able to draft and then keep those players around long term and re-sign them. So you want to keep him around and have him pan out, but the injuries is a concern. Injuries are my concern. Injuries are a concern. Boy says no. FT the GOAT says no. Yeah, this is how I feel. We'll see. Seems like you guys agree with me at that point. Sees you guys agree. All right. If nobody sends a super chat in the next 30 seconds, we're going to sign off and let you guys enjoy the rest of your Tuesday afternoon and week. We will drop content every single day, and it'll be live next Tuesday as well. Fun fact, Justin, next Tuesday will be our final live show before NFL free agency. Correct. Next Tuesday is March, I believe, 4th. Let's find out. March 4th. Free agency begins March 10th. We'll probably go live in some capacity, I'd have to imagine, during the week of free agency. Maybe it's that Tuesday. Maybe it's that Monday on the first day. We'll see. It's a rotating schedule because we'll see if the Dolphins create cap space. If the Miami Dolphins create like the max cap space of like $57 million, maybe we can go live because there would be a lot of intrigue and potential signings for the Dolphins. But if they are like at $25 million and they're not going to sign anyone of relevance on day one of free agency, well, then probably wouldn't go live, right? But oh, we did get a super chat, so we'll flash it on screen before we sign off here. Shout out to King Gaming. Justin's going to get that on screen here in just 1 second. Shout out to King Gaming. Good question. Do you think we could move Austin Jackson to guard? I don't anticipate that being something that happens. Now, I do see a pathway to where that does happen. I'm not going to lie. But here's the thing with Austin Jackson. And I want to pull up the numbers just to make sure I'm very clear. Remember, Austin Jackson was drafted in the first round, 2020, with Tua out of USC, 18th overall pick. He played left tackle that season, right? He was not good as a rookie. He was very, very bad, actually. And then in 2021, the Dolphins moved Austin Jackson to left guard. He played 887 snaps at left guard, where he had 12 penalties, gave up 2 sacks, had a PFF grade of 49.9. He was not good at left guard. Then he did not play all of 2022. And then he officially played in 2023 at right tackle, and he played very well for his standards. The best year of his career. Only allowed 8 penalties, 68.4 offensive grade, 68.8 run blocking. Like, he was much better at right tackle. And that is what got him his 3-year extension where he's currently playing under. And then he played for most of right tackle this past season, was actually fine at right tackle for Miami before getting that season-ending injury. So, yes, he has the capability of playing guard in the NFL because he's done it in the past, but the Dolphins have gotten the best and most out of him at right tackle, which is probably where I would keep him. Now, the only way that I see him moving to guard is if the Dolphins fall in love with one of these offensive tackle prospects, whether it's a Kelvin Banks, a Josh Connerly, a Josh Simmons, an Armand Membu. And they view those 3 or 4 players as a home run, can't miss offensive tackle. Like, yeah, maybe they can play guard, but these guys are just that good at offensive tackle, in my opinion. We're drafting them to be an offensive tackle. Well, then maybe you move Austin Jackson to left guard or right guard. But I would expect Jackson to be at right tackle, and they address offensive guard in free agency or in the middle rounds of the NFL draft. But we'll see. Hopefully that answered your question. Thought that was a pretty good in-depth answer. All right, that will do it for today's show. Appreciate everyone who's tuned in. Appreciate that $2 super chat from King Gaming. Like I said, we'll see you next Tuesday with a live show once again. Videos for the rest of the week. We have 13 days until NFL free agency. Buckle up. Going to be a lot of news and rumors coming out in the next 13 days. Stay tuned. Peace out.